All right, today we're gonna finish off our cinnamon buns. So in the last episode, we looked at how to knead a bread and then how to shape it into a round. So after it's been done, it sits on the counter or in a warm area, and it's gonna go through its first proof for about 45 minutes to 1 hour. During that time, the yeast is gonna be very active and it's gonna rise over that period of time. Now to check it, what we can do is we can sprinkle a little bit of flour on top of here, and then I can take my finger, I'm gonna poke a hole into the dough, and if it has had a full proof, it should keep that hole perfectly like so. If it closes in on itself really quickly, that means that the dough hasn't fully had a full proof yet. Okay, so in which case you would just let it rise for a little bit longer. So typically in a warm environment, it takes about 45 minutes to 1 hour before you can go ahead and do the next steps. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna take the dough out of the bowl. So I'm just gonna remove it by pulling it out, placing it onto the table. Okay, and then I'm going to deflate it by taking my rolling pin, I'm gonna press across into the dough, something like this. Once I have my cross, I'm gonna then go ahead and I'm gonna roll it towards the corners to make a square shape dough, like so. Okay. So it's not perfect right now, but what I want you to do is I want you to make it perfect before you go on to roll it. So we're gonna lift up the dough, and I'm not just pulling from the edge or it will tear. You wanna pull all around the dough evenly till you get a nice square piece of dough on the table. Once this is done, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna roll it out. Now we want it to be a little bit wider. The height is plenty tall enough. So every time after I roll, I take my fingers and I adjust the dough to make sure that I'm getting this nice square edges and even dough. I want the length to be around the length of this small rolling pin and the width minus 4 fingers. So I'm pretty much right where I want to be. The last thing I want to do is just make sure that the dough is quite even and it's not thicker in one area than another. Something like this, okay? Once I'm done here, I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to go on the side closest to me, the long side here, and I'm going to push my fingers into the dough and pull backwards. What that's going to do is going to thin it out and seal it onto the countertop. So I'm just going ahead, and only about a finger width from the edge is all you need. And that's going to make it thin, so when we roll it up and wrap it up, it's got a nice thin edge that can tighten up along. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to take a cake spatula. We're going to take just a little bit of butter. It's easiest if you take a little bit more than you need at the beginning, and you spread it around. And you want to cover, and this butter needs to be soft. That's really, really important. You want to cover the whole surface of your dough with a light layer of butter. Now, right now, it looks like a lot of butter, I know. But don't worry, we're going to take off all the excess butter. If you've got air pockets underneath, make sure you just lift that up and release those air pockets. You don't want those in your dough underneath, okay? There we go. Butter spread around. Now what I want to do is I want to use the flat side of my spatula, and I'm going to just drag it across, and I'm going to pull all the excess butter off. The reason being is I don't want too much butter, because what happens when it goes to bake is it will all run to the bottom of the bun, and when that happens, it will have a soggy bottom, and we want to avoid that from happening. So there we go. We have our dough buttered up nicely. Then you're going to make a cinnamon and brown sugar mixture. This is 30 grams of brown sugar and 3 grams of cinnamon. We're just going to go ahead and we're going to sprinkle that on. Now you see there might be some clumps in there. Just break them up. Sometimes the brown sugar has bigger clumps, so it's always best that you break them up before you start pressing it around too much, so that there's no big brown chunks of brown sugar. All right. Now what I'm going to do is just going to take my fingers and I'm going to press and spread this brown sugar all around the surface of my dough. Try to avoid having it come off. Do your best to keep it all on there. It's all been measured out for this size. So this is going to make 6 medium to small sized cinnamon buns. What you can do is just take your spatula, scoop up any excess brown sugar that may have fallen off, or a scraper if you have one at home. Okay, and then next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thumb and I'm going to press down on the opposite edge of myself, and I'm going to start the roll here. So I'm just going to start the dough to roll. Once I've done that, I'm going to roll it over, and this is where it gets tricky because it wants to stick to your fingers. So you're going to be using your fingers to pull the dough and roll it up. As I'm keeping one hand rolling, the other hand is just helping it along. So first I went left to right, now I'm going to go right to left. Making sure I'm keeping some tension on. I don't want it too tight. If it's too tight, it's just going to all spiral up afterwards. But if it's too loose, it won't have a nice shape and won't look very good. So sometimes when you pull your thumb off, it wants to stick and loosen up. So that's why you got to use all your fingers to help make sure that you have a good shape here. Once you got it halfway through, it makes it much easier. You then can take your whole hand, roll it up, and then just give it a light tuck back to make sure that you have the tension you need. Roll forward, again a light tuck back. I'm going to now take my bowl the sugar was in. I'm going to add a little bit of water into that bowl. I'm going to dab my fingers in it, and I'm going to wet this edge that I had pressed into the table. This wetted edge is going to act like a glue to help stick everything together. So now I'm just going to continue this process, rolling over right until the end, okay? Once I've completely rolled it over, you can see here, this is where it was, but it's almost invisible to see because of the fact that I had pressed it in. So the last thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to sprinkle this with some flour. That's just going to make it so it's easy to handle. It's not going to be sticky anymore, and then just roll it back and forth. Okay, the last thing I have to do now is to cut it. So to cut it, what I do first is I'm going to portion it off. So I'm going to use a scraper or a knife, or you can use your spatula here. First I mark the halfway mark, and then I'm going to try and break that up into 3 pieces. So 1, 2, 3. And then same on this side, 1, 2, 3. Now I find it easiest to get dental floss and a piece of string like this. You're going to just take it underneath of the dough. You're going to line it up with the markings you just had, cross them, and then pull them across. Once you pull it across, then you can then have your piece. Make sure that when you set them out, you're not using the end piece here, but that's going to face down. You're going to get a tray, and that tray is going to be placed inside of there. Going to continue this process, cutting the pieces, crisscross, pull, get underneath, crisscross and pull. This is one of the easiest way to have a really clean cut on your paste or your bread, rather than using a knife. Sometimes I find that people will not make them look as nice. So now I'm just going to place all 6 of them into my tray. And they're a little bit tall right now, but that's okay. What I'm going to do next is I've spaced them out evenly. I want you to just kind of help them to press them down and out a little bit. Okay? Press them down like so. And then what's going to happen is we're going to go for a second proof. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take a towel. I'm going to cover these up so they don't dry out with a towel. Leave them in a nice warm area, and it will sit for about 30 minutes, okay, in a room temperature room around 24 degrees Celsius, and then they will bake. This time you don't want to have a full proof. You want to proof things to about 80%, so that time frame of 30 minutes will be perfect for you, and then you're going to place them in the oven. The oven needs to be preheated at 190 degrees Celsius, and they will bake for about 12 to 15 minutes depending on your oven.